Welcome everyone to our Sunday service. My name is Nayaswami Pranaba, and this is Nayaswami Jyoti, and currently we reside at Ananda Village. I say currently because in Ananda's world you never know where you will be. So, at least I never know where I'll be. My wife, Nayaswami Parvati, isn't here today because she's serving the needs of Ananda Tucson. She was giving Kriya initiation last night and doing their Sunday service program this morning. I'd like to read to you from Paramhansa Yogananda's book of Answered Prayers, Whispers from Eternity. O Spirit, beloved Father, Oversoul of the universe, Spirit of spirits, Friend of friends, teach me the mystery of my existence. Teach me to worship Thee in breathlessness and in deathlessness. In the fire of devotion, burn away my ignorance. In the stillness of my soul, come, Spirit, come. Possess me and teach me to feel Thy immortal presence in and around me. Come, Spirit. Come, Spirit. In hearing this reading again, I just remembered this story that Swami Kriyananda would say often, but I've heard it in other ways as well. And it's about a local church where a bishop is visiting, and he goes to the altar and kneels, and he beats his chest and says, Lord, I am a sinner, forgive me, I am a sinner. And the priest of the church sees the bishop doing this, so he comes up to the altar and kneels and beats his chest and says, Lord, I am a sinner, forgive me, I am a sinner. And then the janitor in the church sees the two fellows up there, and he goes up and he says, Lord, forgive me, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner. And the bishop nudges, the priest says, look who thinks they're a sinner. And it's often the way that we're caught in the magnetism of what's happening. And the world at large, as we know, has a tremendous amount of magnetism to draw us into, in a sense, the periphery of who we are, the extension of who we are, through our senses, through our engagements in our outer self. It's like this little story I heard where this woman comes up to this mother with her new baby and says, wow, what a beautiful baby. And the mother responds, well, that's nothing. You should see her photographs. It's that extension of, wait a minute, we have reality, the true reality, but we get caught in this, well, the image is so great. And that's life, that the image of what life is can dominate our experience and take us away from really what's there for us. Because what is there for us? We're seeking fulfillment. But it's so easy to be caught on the entertainment level of life, to be out there spinning on the various things. And the things are infinite, seemingly. What's really there, though, is just things that keep us rolling past who we are in that fulfillment. When we talk about light and darkness, it really has to do with what is it that's opening up for our experience? Where is our momentum going? Where are we directing what's happening? And there's this little subtle point I remember Swami Kriyananda made many years ago, that he said it's natural for people who get on a spiritual journey to spiritualize their life, spiritualize the different aspects of their life. Seems very natural, normal. But then he said, unless that shifts fairly soon into more that we're living from our spiritual center and then allowing that to express through everything, we will continue to be on the outside looking in, even as we think we're moving forward spiritually. And it's a subtle point, because in the beginning I think we're all very happy just to add spirituality, spiritualizing things in our lives. But it's like we're always looking to the carrot on the stick if that's happening. But if we make this move, this shift in our awareness, in our emphasis of being more focused in our own center, then so much more enrichment can happen in everything. As Yogananda's well-known phrase, center everywhere, circumference nowhere. Meaning that if we find that center more and more, that can be there in everything, everywhere. It doesn't have to be isolated that I've got my spiritual life, and then there's this huge other part, that's my other life. There doesn't have to be any separation. We don't need to say, now I'm going to my meditation spot and I'm really going to be with God. We can always bring that same attitude into every moment, into every part of our lives. You know, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the main sutra is the second sutra in the first part of the book, and it's one that many of us have heard, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, meaning yoga is the neutralization of the vortices, the whirlpools of feeling. And then Patanjali goes on to list these whirlpools. They're called vrittis in Sanskrit. But these whirlpools, the things that demagnetize, or they produce such an alternative negative magnetism that they draw us again into that darkness. And it's interesting, one of the vrittis is, one of the whirlpools of delusion is in Sanskrit called smriti. Now smriti, this word is used by Patanjali 3 different ways in the Yoga Sutras. But the first way, he describes it as one of the obstacles, because memory is what smriti is. And what happens in the beginning is that we long for those things we remember. We have the attachments through both the subconscious and even the conscious part of our experience to those things that happened sometime previous. We remember them with glowing terms. We hearken back to them as being maybe pivotal times in our life, one way or the other. But there's a tendency of that type of memory to pull us into not being here in this moment. We're in the past. And in that whirlpool, we're drawn into less and less of that sense of we're centered in ourselves, and we're always reaching to somewhere else. The second time Patanjali uses the word smriti, he's reflecting and indicating mindfulness. Mindfulness is a big word these days, a well-used word for meditation. But the approach that Yogananda gave us is very much an approach of mindfulness. And Patanjali, in the second emphasis of this idea of smriti, is remembering things to be alive in that deeper sense. So it's remembering where we are, who we are, in terms of what's going on. So if we're using a technique, for instance, that mindfulness is being aware of the breath, perhaps, being aware of a sound, a mantra, being aware of an energy flow, being aware of a vibration. That is the mindfulness that Patanjali emphasizes at this point. But then he goes on to explore the emphasis of smriti in the way that Swami Kriyananda would often give us as the deeper part of smriti, and that's divine remembrance. That's the remembrance of the soul qualities that we have as our true nature. Not something that's an expression of that, but the nature of who we are at our essence. And really the reading today about that we are children of the light is coming from that emphasis that we're always attuned. Again, for each of us, we're going to be at a different point along the journey. But for each of us in this moment, we can open up more and more to that divine remembrance. We can tune in and be in that experience more fully. You know, someone was commenting to me in a class I gave at some point in the last few months, I can't remember which one, but they were saying their nature was tuned to meditating without devotion. Which, a number of people feel that. They feel the blessings of a meditation technique giving peace, giving calmness. And they were a little bit not connected to the emphasis of devotion that we often will bring into our teachings of meditation. And then I remember here a discussion I had with someone a few years ago that said that they were so devotional, it was hard to meditate with the techniques. Interesting, isn't it? You sort of see these two juxtapositions of relating to spirit in their lives. But if we're just meditating out of we're doing it, because devotion can mean different things for different people. It doesn't mean that it has to be the display of devotion necessarily. It's more our openness of our hearts. And I think this person that felt they didn't tune into that, I don't think really in the beginning we're clearly understanding that part of it, that it wasn't the display that was the emphasis, it was the openness of the energy. And even then, you don't necessarily have to feel it's the openness of the heart, although that's, I think, for most of us, or a lot of us, is the natural inclination to tune into. But just the sense of offering and openness is being devoted. It's bringing that devotion in that way. And that really is important for meditation, to go past just an exercise. It becomes much more a living, vibrant experience. And then for that person who felt that the techniques were perhaps kind of stifling their devotion, the challenge there is that devotion being of the heart in a deeper sense, and that's how this person was relating to it, can easily get into being sentiment if it isn't lifted in its magnetism, if it isn't an aspirational flow of that offering. That we can dwell on the level of devotion being still my likes and dislikes, what I want out of life, what I'm inspired by. An inspiration left at just inspiration is fleeting. It won't remain. And so the tendency is to seek further inspiration, other inspiration, some other aspect of inspiration. But inspiration itself has its flow of having us experience what's behind the inspiration. And we come into that more deeply. One of the most powerful and touching stories for me from the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is one of India's wonderful epics, and the epic that the little Bhagavad Gita comes from. One of the most powerful, and I say also touching, that combination of powerful and touching story, is the scene before the battle. So the battle is happening in this story of the Mahabharata, and it reflects Kurukshetra, which is the inner battle. It's the battle of the soul qualities with the qualities that come from the ego with attachment desires. And Arjuna represents that soul quality of fiery self-control and devotion, in a sense. Devotion in his own way, but representing all of us. And then the head of the forces of delusion, Duryodhana, is represented as king material desire. And so they realize they're going to go to battle because there's the warring qualities within each one of us that this is allegorical to. And they've chosen sides. Everyone chooses which side of this they're going to be on. And they realize, both Duryodhana and Arjuna, being the leaders of their forces, that there's Krishna. Now, Krishna plays an interesting part in the drama of the Mahabharata. He, of course, represents the Lord, the divine. But he also represents in the story, he's a ruler of a kingdom. And it's an interesting allegory. And what it reflects is that the Lord isn't separate from us. The Lord, the divine, is also in the moments of every day, in the challenges that happen. How do we rule our kingdom? That's the practical level of experience that Krishna is representing in this allegory. But they realize he hasn't chosen sides. So both Duryodhana and Arjuna rush to the palace where Krishna is. And Duryodhana gets there first. Remember, he's king material desire. So he has a lot of momentum of doing everything first. And he rushes in, and Krishna is in his bedchamber, sleeping. So Duryodhana goes in. And being who he is, material desire, he goes right beside Krishna's head and waits there. He's at least reflective of that he should wait for Krishna to wake up and not force him. Although many people actually do force God. They really push that God should be doing this or doing that. And people's prayers often are kind of demands of God in a way that isn't including God, but imposing on God. So at least Duryodhana in this scene is kind of relaxed about that. And then Arjuna comes right afterwards. Now Arjuna stands at the foot of the bed. And that represents just that humbleness and reverence for the divine. That this is the divine that Arjuna is approaching. And not with being a doormat of being humble in a self-deprecating way, but in this loving, reverent way. And then Krishna opens his eyes and he sees Arjuna. And then he realizes, oh, Duryodhana is here as well. And he asks them, why are you here? And they explain the circumstance that the battle is about to ensue and they want to engage Krishna and his forces in the battle. And so Krishna says, so there are two of you, so I'm going to offer to each of you something. And he says, I will offer one of you myself, but I will not raise a finger in the battle itself, but I will be your guide. And to the other, I will give all my armies, my forces, all my weapons and my armies, which are vast. And then he says, because I saw Arjuna first, Arjuna, you get to choose first. And of course, Duryodhana is not really happy about this, because he was there first, and again demanding that. But Krishna said, no, I saw Arjuna first, and he gets the first choice. And Arjuna, without hesitation, representing all of us in our deeper self, says, Lord, I choose thee. Because where there is adherence to Dharma, there is victory. And Duryodhana, I assume, if this is portrayed in any way that's meaningful, he'd be jumping up in joy and saying, yay, I get the armies, I get the forces, I get the weapons. That's what's important for my army to add on to win this battle. But it's powerful because, and it's powerful in the sense that Arjuna, without hesitation, completely, with all his devotion and sincerity and openness, says, it is you, my Lord, that will bring the victory of my soul into oneness with thee. So that's the allegory that's there. And he does it with the sense of, what else is there in life? There's going to be darkness in the battle. And remember, it's an allegory that's happening for each of us as we pay attention to it. Well, it's not as if the battle doesn't happen when he makes his choice. The battle's still going to be a bruising, crushing experience. And if you've read the Mahabharata, you'll know that. It's not an uplifting part of the story, the battle at times. It's pretty brutal. But it just reflects, the tension that's there between our soul qualities and the qualities that come from the ego, from the lower self, that it's going to be there. So Arjuna recognizes it. It's not like it's going to be an easy task to deal with his inner foes. He recognizes it's going to be a challenge. But he knows even with that happening, that bringing that light of the divine, bringing that awareness of the divine completely in that moment, that will be the sustaining energy. And when that happens for each of us, and it can happen now in this moment, and it can happen every moment, every situation, when that becomes more and more our focus, we can certainly deeply tune into Yogananda's phrase, center everywhere, circumference nowhere, that our lives become this rich experience that's able to be alive, whatever's happening. Seemingly good, seemingly bad, those things are just things that pass through. And our memory is that divine remembrance. It is the joy of the experience of the soul that filters into everything. So we have that spirit always there from the core of who we are. And when we have that, the battle that is there becomes more an adventure. It becomes, I get to do this. I get to live this life ever more fully in that experience of that ever-deepening, ever-expanding bliss and light. Let's take a moment for meditation.